In the early 1970s, a dark shadow fell over the quiet communities of Houston Heights. Teenagers began disappearing without a trace, leaving behind only grieving families and whispers of something sinister lurking beneath the surface of this ordinary neighborhood. By the time the authorities uncovered the truth, Houston would be horrified to learn that one of its own, a man once known as the friendly Candyman, was hiding secrets darker than anyone could have imagined. This is the chilling story of Dean Corll, the Candyman killer, and his horrific spree that left an entire city forever haunted. Houston Heights was a modest, close-knit neighborhood in the 1970s filled with families who lived quiet lives. Dean Corll, a former serviceman, ran a small candy factory with his family, earning him a reputation as a friendly, approachable figure in the community. Children would often see Corll handing out free candy, earning him the nickname the Candy Man. But behind that seemingly friendly demeanor lay a mind twisted by terrifying desires. The first sign of the horror came in 1970. The young boys began to disappear. At first, the disappearances seemed like isolated incidents, but many were attributed to teenage rebellion or boys running away from home. But as the number of missing boys grew, so did the fears of their families, who knew that these children would never abandon their loved ones. Yet the disappearances continued, and the families' pleas went unanswered, their desperation mounting with each day that passed. The victims were mostly teenage boys, friends who had grown up together in Houston Heights. They vanished in broad daylight, lured by the promise of parties, rides, or gifts. But once they fell into Corll's trap, they were never seen again. For years, the community lived in fear, wondering who could be taking their children and why. Parents kept a close eye on their kids, but even with their precautions, boys continued to vanish, slipping into the shadows without a trace. For years, police efforts to find the missing boys yielded no results. They saw the case as isolated incidents, not realizing that the disappearances were all linked to one man. Dean Corll managed to stay hidden in plain sight, living his double life without arousing suspicion. With help from two local teenagers, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, Corll had created an elaborate system to lure his victims, making it nearly impossible for anyone to connect him to the crimes. Brooks and Henley acted as accomplices, bringing boys they knew into Corll's orbit in exchange for rewards. Together, they would drive around Houston Heights, befriending teens and promising them good times, only to lead them to Corll's house, where unimaginable horrors awaited. Corll's ability to evade capture left Houston Heights in a constant state of dread, and families grew more paranoid, fearing their sons could be next. Yet, despite these horrific acts, Corll continued undetected. The police, unaware of the growing body count, failed to make connections. They were trapped in a web of misdirection, convinced that these disappearances were runaways, not victims of a brutal serial killer. Each missed lead, even overlooked piece of evidence, allowed Corll to continue his spree, and the community's unease grew as the case went cold. The truth behind the Candyman's reign of terror finally came to light on August 8, 1973, but in the most shocking way. Elmer Wayne Henley, one of Corll's teenage accomplices, turned on him in a brutal confrontation. Henley, who had grown tired of Corll's violence, found himself in a desperate struggle for survival. He took a revolver and shot Corll, ending the Candyman's reign in a matter of seconds. The nightmare was over, but the real horror was only beginning to unfold. After Cole's death, Henley and Brooks began to reveal the dark truth, leading police to a series of buried sites where the bodies of Cole's victims lay hidden. In total, the remains of at least 28 boys were found, buried in various locations around Houston, including a boathouse and a remote patch of woods. The families who had waited years for answers finally learned the horrific fate of their loved ones. The unimaginable reality shattered the quiet life of Houston Heights, and the community struggled to come to terms with the evil that had been hiding in their midst. Corll was dead, but the weight of his crimes lingered, an inescapable reminder of the trust he had betrayed and the lives he had stolen. The boys who once roamed their neighborhood with innocence and hope were now a haunting memory. Families were left with only fragments of closure, knowing that justice had come too late for their children. The Candyman was gone, but the scars he left on Houston Heights remain, a dark chapter that continues to haunt the city to this day. The story of Dean Corll is one of unimaginable betrayal, a man who used kindness as a mask for horror. Known as the Candyman, he became one of America's most notorious killers, a figure who turned a trusting community innocence into terror. His crimes serve as a grim reminder that evil can wear the most unassuming faces, and that even the most familiar places can hide the darkest secrets.